Okay, so I told you about the stages of history where different kinds of technology and different economy changed the social relations and therefore the way that people think. You went from monarchy to aristocracy and different feudal forms where a few people have power and most people are serfs and peasants, and eventually the capitalist form, which is democratic, where there are a few different classes like the nobility and aristocracy, and then the bourgeoisie. They're the ones who have money and control the means of production, the economy, and so on. And the proletariat, the ones who are the masses who labor. And basically, Marx saw this as coming down to two different classes, those who have and those who don't have, or the proletariat, the laborers, and the bourgeoisie, the owners. And in democracy, the propaganda is that everybody is equal. But the reality and the material conditions show that people are not equal, that there are proletariat who are poor and labor and live lower quality lives, and there are the bourgeoisie who are rich and live higher quality lives. And while we have the claim of equality and power in the hands of the people in a democracy, the material conditions, the real actual reality, the social relations and the economy show that none of this is true. And Marx believed that it's material conditions that are essentially important, and all sorts of thoughts and ideas and art and culture and religion and philosophy are just different ways of masking the material conditions or supporting the material conditions so that the social structure gets solidified and no one can break it. Now, the final stage then after capitalism is communism. And so you go through different stages, the Asiatic mode of production, feudal economy, earlier where people bartered and things like that, up past the Industrial Revolution to factories, and factories and large-scale mass production and other technologies allow capitalism to work. And capitalism, however, entails an internal contradiction. The contradiction is that it argues that everyone who works hard can become affluent and have good standard of living because of hard work, when in fact, this is just based on the idea the system is flexible and it allows everyone to move up and down depending on their individual qualities. But the fact is that the whole of society, all of art, your thoughts, all of the movies that are made, all of the way that culture works, is set up to make sure that society remains more or less stable, that there are powerful people who are rich, affluent, who make laws, who control schools, who control thoughts, and then there are the powerless people who just work physically with their labor and have low standards of living throughout their shorter and less healthy lives. And so this contradiction is going to eventually force a change. And the change has to happen in three different ways. The movement from capitalism to communism, and the change has to happen by, number one, the contradiction that is in capitalism becoming apparent to people, that everyone sees that the capitalist system actually can't work, that it destroys the environment, that it destroys the livelihood of people, that it forces people into a kind of slavery of working with their body, even though it teaches everyone that everybody is free and equal. And it also has a kind of contradiction in its economic structure, which is a little too complicated to explain to you, but it's basically a hypothesis about how in all businesses and factories and production, the rate of profit necessarily decreases over time. So falling rate of profit ensures not everyone in the world can become rich through capitalism. There's always going to be haves and have-nots. These contradictions have to be recognized by people, so that's one thing. And of course, the Communist Manifesto, the 1848 book of Marx and Engels, was to try to awaken people to these contradictions, that communism was going to come because capitalism was going to fall. The second thing that has to happen is there has to be a revolution based on that. Everyone recognizing the contradictions and the problems that all the proletariat, the have-nots, will forever face in capitalism. So there's no point trying to continue with capitalism because it's inherently contradictory system. And so the proletariat has to then rise up and there should be a revolution. And of course, Lenin led that revolution in Russia. And then the third thing for communism to become a reality is that everyone's consciousness has to raise. So Marx wrote at the end of one of his books called German Ideology that what is necessary is that bourgeoisie transcend themselves and become like the proletariat. In other words, they become laborers. They learn to put their thought and wealth into actual production. And what is necessary equally is that the proletariat, who are all just physical laborers, should become philosophers. They have to learn how to think, learn how to understand the nature of the world and understand the nature of things. So his famous saying is that basically, in order for communism to happen, every kind of person who functions primarily through thought has to engage in action, and a proletariat who function only through their selling their physical labor has to become mentally cognizant, has to become like a philosopher. And so the third point is that in order for communism to work, there needs to be an elevation of human consciousness. That means everybody's minds have to expand. Now, the first thing about everyone recognizing contradictions leads to the second thing, which is that then a revolution is possible. But a revolution without the third thing, without the expansion of consciousness, ensures a failed revolution. That's why the Russian Revolution was failed. So Trotsky was more like Marx in that sense that he understood the need for everyone's consciousness to evolve. But after Lenin, who led the revolution, so the second step, he died before the third step could be achieved. And then there was that struggle between Stalin and Trotsky. And Stalin, his consciousness wasn't evolved. He just wanted to be like the Tsar. He wanted to hold all the power himself. That's why he banished Trotsky, who understood that for communism to work, needed some essential things like the evolution of human consciousness, wide-scale education and literacy, teaching philosophy to laborers, and ensuring that the rest of the world became communist too. Because the nature of capitalist propaganda is that if one country becomes communist, all the other capitalist countries will keep trying to destroy that communist country. That's why the US hates Cuba, because Cuba became communist. And the Americans who are capitalists don't want the Cuban equality, the good lifestyle that people live, and the good health care that everyone receives, and how no one has to pay for university and no one has to pay for health care and all that. They don't want those ideas coming to America and getting Americans thinking too much. So that's why the US has tried to assassinate Castro so many times and overthrow the Cuban communist government. That's why the US attacked Vietnam and Cambodia, Venezuela, because they were communist. In all these countries that the US keeps bombing is because they want to make sure that no communist country survives. Trotsky realized that the only way that the Soviet Union was going to be a successful communist state, according to Marx's thinking, is if they lobbied throughout the rest of the world to have total global revolution. So that's why Trotsky was in Mexico, to try to create a revolution. But Stalin didn't care. He just wanted absolute control of the Soviet Union, and he didn't have any kind of philosophical thinking about it, like Lenin or Trotsky. So in Marxist thought, communism requires the large-scale awareness of everyone of the inherent contradiction of capitalism, and then the revolution, and then the elevation of consciousness. Now, a communist state is a state where there isn't a battle for resources, but everyone takes what she needs from the community, and everyone works and gives back what the community needs. And so to think that everyone will take only what they need and give back what they owe is to assume that people are much better than they are now. Because right now, everyone takes as much as they can and gives as little as they can. And that's the way that the human morality works. That's the way human psychology works. And that's because human consciousness is very low. So that's why Marx thought that human consciousness has to evolve before people will be able to live in a communist society. And since human consciousness has not evolved, that's why communism has never worked anywhere. And so what you see in Animal Farm is that the consciousness of the animals is very confused. Like, first they're trying to celebrate their difference by saying four legs good and two legs bad, because the animals who are the proletariat recognize that they're good and that the capitalists, the farmers, are bad. Farmers are like the bourgeoisie in Orwell's story. So they want to have pride in their labor and their condition. So they say four legs good, two legs bad. But then the communists, since their consciousness is not evolved, become just like the capitalists. And so those who can stand on two legs take over. So they're like Stalin. And then they rewrite the motto that two legs good, four legs bad, so that those few animals who are able to walk on two legs then become the leader of a totalitarian system, like Stalin's communist Soviet Union was a totalitarian system where everyone had to completely obey the law or they would be sent to gulags. So problem that George Orwell is illustrating is that basically our human nature or animal nature is never evolved enough to make communism work. And the biggest philosophical argument about communism is, can people ever get elevated enough morality and psychology and consciousness to allow them to live the tranquil, peaceful, and prosperous life of communism? Every place that has become communist in this world, like Cuba, like the Soviet Union, like Vietnam, Cambodia, were extremely unjust places where people took over in a tyrannical way, like Stalin or Castro, and so on. And so the fact is that the third criterion of Marx has never been fulfilled because human consciousness has not evolved. So in communism, you have everybody just taking what they need from society and giving back what they owe, whatever they can give. So if I'm a strong person, then maybe I'll contribute to society through physical labor. If I'm very intellectually smart, maybe I'll contribute to society through intellectual labor. If I'm a great architect, I'll contribute to society by constructing buildings. If I'm a great musician, I'll contribute to society by making music. But everybody will be paid the same. So in communism, you don't have that motivation of capitalism that you should become a lawyer or a doctor because you're going to make way more money than becoming a plumber. In communism, a plumber is equally valuable to society as a doctor is, because every society needs plumbing just like it needs healthcare. It's not arranged like the capitalist society where we value various kinds of human activity more than others. Instead, all legitimate human activity is given equal value, equal worth, and so that means that a doctor and a plumber will draw more or less an equal salary from the collective finances. And so it tries to eliminate greed from human consciousness. Again, that's why human consciousness has to evolve from what it is now for it to work. It also eliminates envy, it eliminates spite or malice, hatred, and things like this. So this is why the consciousness change is necessary in communism. So in communism, everyone contributes what they can, takes what they need, and they are free. They don't have to work 9 to 5. They just work whenever they feel like it, and they can do whatever leisure activities they want the rest of the day. So Marx said people will be fishing in the morning, criticizing, writing poetry in the afternoon, sleeping in a hammock in the evening on the beach, and all of society will be productive and everyone will enjoy true equality. So the idea is that all of those things that were claimed to be true in capitalism, that people are equal, that you can live well if you work hard, things like that, they become actually true in communism. So in dialectical materialism, the idea that matter, material conditions, economy, and so on is all that is really important, and ideas and all these thoughts and stuff just follow from the economic conditions. All of these material ideas and the dialectical process where things evolve over time, where you have first a slave mindset who worships a king or a monarch, and then you have a feudal mindset who worships master, the lord, and then you have aristocratic mindset who worships just a few powerful people, and then you have a democratic mindset who realizes that everyone should have dignity inherently and should be free and equally. Each of those earlier conditions had contradictions, because in the first one, how can one person be free and everyone else not? Why should one person be free? If a person can be free, everyone should be free. In the feudal, why should I labor and someone else gets the fruits of my labor? Why shouldn't I get the fruits of my own labor? In the capitalist situation, why should you claim equality and practice inequality? If everyone's equal, how come a doctor makes more money than a plumber? And so every previous organization of the economy and government has been contradictory. And communism, according to Marx, is the only form of government that entails no contradiction. And consequently, since it entails no contradiction, that means it is the right and proper form of government for the human person, for the human being. So Marx believed in something called species being, that every kind of species has a proper way of being. And the proper way for the human to be, when it is fully evolved, both physically and in its consciousness, is to live in a communist state. Because the communist state has no contradiction and is perfectly adapted to the perfect human. And so that's what communism is. It is the final form of human organization where the material conditions are in perfect alignment to people's mental conditions, or what Marx called spiritual conditions. So where matter and spirit are perfectly in harmony. That means by spirit, Marx didn't believe in religion, right? By spirit, Marx means like enlightened human activities. Art, culture, religion, philosophy. He believes all those things, but he only believes them when the material conditions allow them to be true. And in all previous forms of economy and government, the material conditions have not allowed spiritual things to be true. So, so that's what communism is. It's a final state of human government and economy that requires everyone knows the contradictions of all the previous conditions, and that everybody's consciousness evolves to allow them to participate in a just society with perfect equality and freedom, where all human labor will be valued, and therefore all human labor will produce prosperity that is shared equally. And in order for communism to work, according to Marx and to Trotsky, it has to require everybody's participation, and that all governments should become communist. Because as long as some parts of the world remain in old contradictory organizations, like if there is caste in some societies, if there is capitalism in some economies, if there is feudalism or slavery in some cultures, as long as all of those things are true, then those cultures and societies and governments will try to spread and spew their propaganda into the communist society and cause people distress and reduce their consciousness, because it will create enmity and strife and discord and jealousy and all the kinds of things that have to be overcome by humans in a communist society. So essentially, communism is paradise on earth, and that's why it has never worked till now.